never thought I'd be the only one standing at my husband's funeral. Not after 40 years of marriage. Not after everything we went through. But there I was, alone. The church was silent, except for the echo of my own footsteps. Rows of empty pews stretched before me like a cruel joke. I half expected someone to burst through the doors, late and breathless, with flowers in hand. But no one came. Just me and George's coffin. I sat down in the front pew and stared at the polished wood. His name was engraved in gold: George Holloway. Beloved husband, father, and grandfather. I whispered under my breath, beloved by who, George? Because it sure doesn't feel like it today. The air smelled faintly of lilies, the kind he used to bring me every anniversary. Now they surrounded his coffin, lifeless and cold, just like the marriage we used to have, just like the family we built together. When I called Peter, our eldest, he said, Mom, you know I can't cancel the tournament. It's the club championship. I didn't argue. I just said, it's your father's funeral, Peter. He sighed and said, Dad would understand. Then he hung up. When I called Celia, my only daughter, she was having brunch with her friends in some fancy downtown cafe. She said, Mom, funerals are so depressing. I'd rather celebrate his life in my own way. I didn't even know what that meant. Celebrate his life? The man who gave her everything? I remember standing there with a phone in my hand, hearing the laughter in the background, her friends ordering mimosas, her voice fading away as she promised to visit soon. She never did. So I came here alone, in my black dress, the same one I wore to his retirement party 10 years ago. The one George said made me look elegant like Audrey Hepburn. Funny how the same dress can make you feel so different depending on the occasion. I looked around again. The silence was heavy. Even the priest looked uncomfortable. He asked if I wanted to wait a little longer before starting. I shook my head. No, I said quietly. He's waited long enough. The ceremony began. The words felt hollow: faithful husband, loving father. I wanted to believe them, but as I sat there, I couldn't help but wonder if I had been blind all these years. Because love shouldn't end like this. Not with empty pews and ungrateful children. Not with loneliness sitting beside you like a ghost. I closed my eyes, remembering the early days. George and I were just kids back then, young, broke, and completely in love. We built everything from scratch. He worked 2 jobs, I took care of the kids, and somehow we made it work. Peter wanted to go to private school. George said we couldn't afford it, but I sold my mother's pearls to pay for it. I told him, our children will never struggle like we did. He smiled at me and said, you're the heart of this family, May. That was a long time ago. I thought of Celia too. She always had a way of twisting my words. When I helped her buy her first house, she said, you owe me that much after how strict you were growing up. Strict. That's what she called protecting her from her own bad choices. And now she couldn't even spare one morning to say goodbye to her father. The priest's voice echoed softly. Would anyone like to say a few words? Silence. He glanced at me, hopeful. I stood up slowly, my knees trembling. I walked to the podium, my heels clicking against the marble floor. Every step felt heavier than the last. When I reached the front, I looked down at George's coffin and took a deep breath. George was complicated. I began. A small sad smile escaped me. He wasn't perfect, but he was mine. And for a long time, that was enough. I paused, my throat tightening. He loved his children, worked hard for them, sacrificed for them, and maybe that's why it hurt so much that they're not here today. My voice cracked on the last word. The echo filled the church, bouncing off the walls like a confession. I closed my eyes and whispered, you deserved better, George. We both did. When the ceremony ended, I stayed behind as the coffin was lowered into the ground. The sun had come out, but it didn't feel warm. I stood there watching, my hands clutching my purse like it was the only thing holding me together. I thought about leaving, about pretending the whole thing never happened, but something inside me refused. I needed to see it through. I needed to know I hadn't given up on him the way everyone else had. The gravedigger nodded respectfully when it was done. He looked at me and said softly, you loved him, didn't you? I smiled through tears. Yes, I whispered, even when he made it hard to. He tipped his hat and walked away, leaving me alone again. I stayed a little longer. The breeze rustled through the trees. Birds chirped in the distance, unaware of the ache in my chest. I reached into my bag and pulled out a small photo. George holding baby Ethan, our grandson. He looked so proud that day. Ethan was the only one who ever reminded me of the man I married. He had George's kindness, his curiosity, his heart. He's the only one who called to ask how I was after George died. He said, Grandma, I wish I could have skipped school and come see you. Mom said it wasn't necessary, but I wanted to. That call meant more to me than anything. As I left the cemetery, I looked back one last time. The marble headstone gleamed in the sunlight. I whispered, rest now, George. I'll handle the rest. But deep down, I knew that the rest wouldn't be easy, because something had shifted inside me that day. Something sharp, something cold. A decision was forming in the quiet corners of my mind. I had given my children everything, my time, my money, my heart, and in return they gave me indifference, neglect, absence. That was the day I decided decided it would all end. Not the grief, but the giving. I didn't know it yet, but this funeral wasn't just George's goodbye. It was the beginning of mine. The house felt different that evening. Still. Too still. When I walked through the front door, the silence wrapped around me like a heavy blanket. No footsteps. No laughter. No George calling from his armchair asking, "May, did you record the game?" Just nothing. I dropped my purse on the table and stood there for a long moment, staring at the empty living room. The same living room where we'd spent Christmas mornings, where George taught Peter to tie a Windsor knot, where Celia had her 16th birthday, crying over a boy who broke her heart. Now it was just me and the ticking clock. I made myself a cup of tea, chamomile. George used to say it tasted like hot flowers, and he'd always make a face when I drank it. I smiled faintly, then sat by the window, watching the rain begin to fall. My hands were trembling, so I wrapped them around the cup to steady them, not from the cold, but from the ache. I kept seeing their faces, Peter and Celia, laughing carefree, living their perfect lives while I buried their father alone. And I couldn't shake one question. Where did I go wrong? I thought I had done everything right. Every sacrifice, every sleepless night, every compromise. When Peter wanted that new car in college, I sold the second car George and I shared for years. When Celia wanted her dream wedding at the vineyard, I took out a loan under my name, something George never knew. We gave them everything, and they gave us nothing. I leaned back and stared at the framed photo on the mantle, our family portrait from 10 years ago. We all looked so happy. George was in the middle, arms around our kids, smiling that big goofy grin of his. And me, I was the one holding everything together, even then. But behind that smile, I was exhausted, because loving them was like running on a treadmill, always moving, never arriving. Later that night, I went into George's study. I hadn't been in there since he passed. The faint scent of his cologne still lingered, oak and musk. His glasses were sitting on his desk, right where he left them. Beside them, his journal. He always said he kept one just to stay organized. But as I flipped it open, I realized it was more than that. He'd written about everything. Memories, regrets, little pieces of himself I never saw. There was one entry from 3 months before he died. It read, "I wish the kids would visit more. May doesn't say it, but I can see it hurts her. Peter's always busy. Celia always makes excuses. Sometimes I wonder if we raise them to expect too much, or if we just love them too easily. I'm proud of them, but I miss when they needed us." I pressed the page to my chest, tears burning behind my eyes. He felt it too. The distance, the unspoken pain. We both did. The next morning, I called Peter again. He didn't answer, so I left a message. "Peter, it's Mom. Your father's service was yesterday. I just wanted you to know it was beautiful. I wish you'd been there. I wish you'd seen what love looks like, even in silence." My voice cracked, but I kept going. "I'm fine, by the way. Don't worry about me." But that was a lie, 'cause I wasn't fine. I was broken in quiet, invisible ways. When I hung up, I noticed George's old checkbook sitting on the shelf. The sight of it stirred something inside me. For decades, I'd managed every bill, every mortgage payment, every donation, every request from our children. I knew where every penny went, and I knew how much I had left. That night, I made a list. Names, accounts, assets, and at the very bottom, one sentence in bold letters. "It ends here." 2 days later, Celia called. Her voice was sugar-coated as always. "Mom, I was just thinking about you. How are you holding up?" I said. "I'm fine, Celia. The funeral was lovely." "Oh," she said after a pause. "Right. I was going to ask, was the will read yet?" The word stung like lemon in an open wound. I said quietly, "No, not yet." "Oh, good," she said quickly, "because Peter and I were talking and we thought, well, since we both have families now, it might make sense if we handle things together, you know? Handle things. That's what she called it." I took a breath. "Celia," I said softly, "do you even know what your father wanted?" She hesitated. "Well, I mean, we'll find out soon enough, right?" I closed my eyes. "Your father wanted you there, Celia. That's all he ever wanted." The silence on the other end was deafening. Then the familiar click of her hanging up. That was the moment I decided. No more excuses. No more hoping they change. I opened the drawer and pulled out George's old fountain pen. I grabbed a fresh sheet of paper and began drafting my new will. I left the house to my grandson, Ethan, not because of his age or potential. He was only 16, but because he cared. Because he showed up. Every week he called to ask how I was doing. Every Christmas he brought me a handmade card. And when George was in the hospital, Ethan was the only one who sat beside me, holding my hand. No phone, no distractions, just quiet love. That's what family means. Not blood, not money, loyalty. I wrote it all down carefully. "To my grandson, Ethan Holloway, I leave my home and estate with the hope that he will continue the legacy of kindness his grandfather once carried in his heart. To my children, Peter and Celia Holloway, I leave my forgiveness, nothing more." When I finished, I sat back in my chair. For the first time in years, I felt free. The pen clinked softly as I placed it down. I whispered, "You be proud of me, George, because I finally did what he never could." I stood up for myself. Later that night, as as I folded the letter and tucked it into the safe, I felt something unexpected: peace. Not the kind that comes from prayer or time, but the kind that comes from truth. I knew my children would be furious when they found out, but I also knew it was time they learned that love cannot be bought with neglect. It must be earned. I poured myself another cup of tea, staring out the window at the rain again. The garden lights flickered, reflecting off the wet glass, and in that moment I realized I wasn't afraid of being alone anymore, because sometimes solitude isn't a punishment, it's protection. But the peace didn't last long, because 2 days later, Peter showed up at my door, unannounced. His eyes were red, but not from grief, from anger. "Mom," he said sharply, "we need to talk." And just like that, the storm I'd been preparing for finally arrived. Peter stood in the doorway, drenched from the rain. He didn't even ask to come in. He just pushed past me like the house still belonged to him, like nothing had changed. I watched as he tossed his wet jacket over the chair, water dripping onto the hardwood floor I'd polished that morning. His voice was sharp. "Celia told me you're rewriting the will. Is that true?" I didn't answer right away. Instead, I closed the door slowly and said, "Would you like some tea?" He scoffed. "Tea? Mom, I'm serious." His tone cut through the quiet like glass. That same tone he used when he was 16, demanding the car keys because everyone else's parents let them drive. Some things never change. I walked to the kitchen, keeping my movements calm, steady. "Peter," I said softly, "you didn't come to your father's funeral." He rolled his eyes. "I told you, Mom, I couldn't cancel the tournament." "The tournament," I repeated, my voice low. "You couldn't cancel a game for your father's funeral?" He sighed. "Look, I know how this looks, but Dad wouldn't have wanted me to throw away my shot. He was competitive, remember?" I turned toward him, meeting his eyes. "Yes, but he never put pride above love." That silenced him. For a moment, he shifted uncomfortably, then crossed his arms. "This isn't about that. This is about what's fair." "What's fair?" I asked. "Yes," he snapped. "Dad worked his whole life for this house, for everything you two built. You can't just give it all to Ethan. He's a kid." My hands trembled slightly as I set the teacups down. "Ethan has more heart than the two of you combined," I said quietly. "That's not fair," he said again, louder this time. "You're punishing us because we have lives, because we're not sitting around grieving the same way you do." My patience cracked. "No, Peter, I'm punishing you for forgetting what family means." He blinked at me as if I'd slapped him. Then his voice softened, almost pleading. "Mom, listen, we made mistakes, okay? But you can't just erase us. Celia's been crying since she found out." I almost laughed. "Celia cries when her latte isn't the right temperature." He frowned. "You're being cruel." "No," I said, stepping closer. "I'm being honest." He sat down, rubbing his temples. "You're not thinking straight. You're grieving. You need time." I felt something shift in me then, something that had been quiet for too long. "I've had time, Peter. Too much of it. I had time to raise you, to pay your bills, to bail you out when your business failed, to help you start again. And do you know what you said to me after all that?" He looked up uneasy. "You said, 'Thanks, Mom, but I'll handle it from here.'" I smiled bitterly. "You've been handling it ever since." He didn't reply, just stared at the table, jaw tight. After a long silence, he muttered, "Dad wouldn't have done this to us." I took a deep breath. "Maybe not, but your father wasn't the one left sitting alone at his own funeral." That landed like a blow. His face hardened, his voice rising. "This isn't about guilt, Mom. You can't guilt us into love." My voice broke. "Then what else is left, Peter? What else do you call 40 years of sacrifice if not love?" He stood abruptly, chair scraping against the floor. "You know what? Maybe Celia was right. You've lost it. You're letting grief make you bitter." Bitter. That word stung. I watched as he grabbed his coat and stormed toward the door. At the doorway, he paused. "If you go through with this, Mom, don't expect us to come around anymore." I looked at him steadily. "You already stopped coming around a long time ago." He didn't answer. He just slammed the door behind him, and the sound echoed through the house like thunder. After he left, I stood there for a while, listening to the rain against the windows. It was strange how quiet peace could sound right after a storm. I poured the untouched tea into the sink and whispered, "Goodbye, Peter." My reflection in the kitchen window looked older than I remembered, tired, but also stronger. The next morning, I woke up early. For the first time in years, I made breakfast just for myself. Scrambled eggs, toast, and black coffee. No rush, no noise, no expectations. As I ate, I found myself humming an old tune George used to play on the radio during Sunday mornings. It felt almost like life was returning, slow and fragile. But then the phone rang. When I saw the caller ID, my chest tightened. "Celia." I hesitated before answering. "Mom," she said in that sweet, careful voice she used whenever she wanted something. "Yes, Celia." She sighed dramatically. "Peter told me what happened." "Mom, why are you doing this to us?" "To you." I repeated. "No, dear. I'm doing this for me." There was a pause, then a hint of anger in her tone. "You're really leaving everything to Ethan? A teenager? What does he even know about taking care of property?" I smiled faintly. "He knows how to care for people. That's more than enough. Oh, come on, she snapped. You're overreacting. We didn't come to the funeral because it was short notice, and Peter had that golf. I cut her off. Celia, stop. Silence. Your father was dead for 3 days before either of you called me. 3 days. Do you know what that does to a mother's heart? Her voice softened. Mom, we thought you needed space. I shook my head. You thought wrong. She exhaled sharply. Fine. You know what? That's how you want it. Go ahead. Give it all to your little golden boy. But don't expect me to come begging when he ruins everything. Then she hung up, just like that, as if 40 years of motherhood could be ended with one phone call. That night, I sat by the fire, staring at the flickering light. Every flame seemed to dance with memories, birthdays, graduations, family dinners, each one fading into smoke. I felt the grief again, but this time it was different. It wasn't just for George. It was for the family I thought I had. But underneath the sadness, there was something else, resolve. Because even though my children had abandoned me, I still had one thing they couldn't take, my choice. The next morning, I sealed the updated will and took it to my lawyer's office. He looked surprised when I handed him the envelope. Mrs. Holloway, he said kindly, are you sure about this? Yes, I replied, more sure than I've ever been. He nodded. I'll process it right away. Do you want your children informed now or later? Later, I said. Let them find out the way they find out everything else. Too late. As I left his office, I felt the autumn wind brush against my face. Crisp, cold, cleansing. And for the first time since the funeral, I smiled, because this wasn't the end. It was the start of something new. But little did I know, Peter and Celia weren't done with me yet. 3 days passed in silence. Not the peaceful kind. The kind that hums before a storm. I tried to fill the hours, laundry, cleaning, sorting through George's old files, but my mind kept circling back to Peter's threat. If you go through with this, don't expect us to come around anymore. He said it like it was punishment, but to me it sounded like relief. Still, I knew my children. They didn't give up easily, not when money was involved. On the 4th morning, I heard the crunch of tires on the driveway. When I peeked through the window, I froze. A black SUV, and right behind it, a silver sedan. Peter and Celia, together. I took a breath, bracing myself. By the time the doorbell rang, my hands were already trembling. I opened the door to find both of them standing there, side by side, faces tight with the kind of forced concern that comes from guilt dressed as love. Mom, Celia began, her voice too sweet to be real. We just wanted to check on you. I stepped aside slowly. Of course you did. They entered the house like strangers. Celia's heels clicked against the floor while Peter surveyed the room, his eyes darting to the framed photos, the antiques, the space that would one day, at least in their minds, belong to them. We sat in the living room. The tension was thick enough to touch. Peter spoke first. Mom, we've been talking. We think you're making a mistake. I stirred my tea calmly. You've made that clear. Celia leaned forward. We get that you're angry, but you're acting out of emotion. You shouldn't make financial decisions while you're grieving. I looked up, meeting her eyes. I'm not grieving anymore, Celia. I'm remembering. She blinked, confused. Remembering what? All the times I said yes when I should have said no. Peter sighed. Look, Mom, we know we haven't been around much, okay? But we're trying. We're here now. I set my cup down and smiled faintly. You're here now because you're scared I'll cut you out. Celia gasped. Mom, how can you even think that? Because I know you, I said quietly, and I know what fear looks like when it wears love's disguise. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Peter leaned forward, lowering his voice. We're not here to fight. We just want what's fair. I tilted my head. Fair? You mean you want your inheritance? He didn't deny it. Celia crossed her arms. Mom, you can't honestly think Ethan deserves everything. He's 16. He doesn't understand money, property, or responsibility. He understands compassion, I replied, and that's worth more than all of this combined. She laughed bitterly. You've lost it. You're putting your whole life in the hands of a kid who still believes in Santa Claus. My tone sharpened. At least he believes in something. That shut her up. Peter stood up, pacing. Okay, fine, Ethan's a nice kid, but this isn't how Dad would have wanted things. I turned toward him. You didn't even show up to find out what your father wanted. His face hardened. Because you didn't tell us how serious it was. I laughed quietly. You mean I didn't beg? The truth hung in the air like smoke. They didn't like hearing it, but it was the truth nonetheless. Celia finally snapped. You're punishing us because we're not perfect, because we don't worship you like Ethan does. But you're forgetting something, Mom. You raised us. So whatever you hate in us, you created. Her words sliced through me. I opened my mouth to speak, but Peter interrupted. Enough. Mom, listen, just sign the old will. Keep things simple. We'll take care of everything. You don't have to worry about lawyers or paperwork. I stared at him, speechless for a moment. Then I said softly, you think I'm worried about lawyers? He frowned. Then what is this about? I stood up, my voice calm but firm. It's about respect, about love, about a funeral where not one of you bothered to show up. Celia rolled her eyes. God, Mom, are we really back to that again? Yes, I said sharply, because you still don't get it. You think funerals are about the dead. They're not. They're about the living. They're about showing up when it hurts. The air went still. Celia's lips parted, but no words came out. Peter finally exhaled, frustration spilling over. You're impossible. I met his gaze, unflinching. No, Peter. I'm just finally awake. They exchanged glances, an unspoken conversation passing between them. Then Celia smiled, the kind of smile that had manipulation written all over it. Fine, Mom. If that's how you feel, we'll just let the lawyer handle it. I nodded slowly. You do that. But as they walked toward the door, she turned back. You're making a huge mistake. When Ethan grows up, he'll forget you too. They all do. That one hit deep. I didn't let it show. I simply said, then I guess I'll take my chances. They left without another word. The door closed softly, but the silence that followed was louder than any argument. Later that night, Ethan called. Grandma? Mom and Uncle Peter were here, weren't they? I smiled faintly. You always know. He hesitated. They said some things about me. I just wanted to make sure you're okay. My heart swelled. Oh, sweetheart, I'm fine. They just don't understand what love really looks like. He was quiet for a moment. Then he said softly, Grandpa would be proud of you, Grandma. You're the strongest person I know. My throat tightened. You think so? I know so, he said. And I'll come visit this weekend, okay? All right, I whispered, smiling. I'll make your favorite pie. After we hung up, I sat by the window, looking out at the rain-soaked yard. The reflection of the lamp flickered against the glass, like a faint echo of my past life, one that was slowly fading away. The fight with my children had left a scar, but also a strange calm. For the first time, I wasn't the one begging to be seen. I was the one standing tall. Still, I knew it wasn't over. Peter and Celia wouldn't walk away quietly. They'd find another way in. And the next time, they wouldn't come with words. They'd come with lawyers. And deep down, I felt it. The story wasn't finished. The battle for my peace had only just begun. 2 weeks passed. Quiet ones. Almost too quiet. The leaves outside had turned golden brittle, whispering against the windows like old secrets. Autumn always reminded me of George. Steady, dependable, fading softly into memory. I spent those days in small routines. Morning tea, gardening, organizing the house, trying to pretend everything was normal. But normal had changed. It wasn't the same kind of silence I once hated. This was new, purposeful, peaceful, until the letter came. It was a thick envelope, crisp and official looking, the kind that smells like trouble before you even open it. I stood at the kitchen counter, the morning sun spilling across the marble, and read the name printed on the corner. Henderson and Blake Law Offices. My heart sank. Peter's lawyers. I opened it carefully, though my hands were trembling. The words were polite, too polite, but the meaning was clear. Peter and Celia were contesting the will. I sat down slowly, the paper crackling in my hands. It was almost funny in a cruel way. After all the years of giving, now they wanted to take even what wasn't theirs yet. I reread the letter twice, then 3 times. Each word felt heavier. They accused me of acting under emotional distress and being unduly influenced by a minor. A minor. That's what they called Ethan. I laughed quietly, bitterly. If only they knew. Ethan had been the only one keeping me sane. Later that evening, Ethan stopped by. He came in carrying a paper bag of groceries, his hair damp from the rain. Grandma, he said, grinning, I brought soup mix and your favorite biscuits. I smiled, trying to hide the letter on the table, but he noticed. He always noticed. His smile faded. What's that? Nothing important, I said. Grandma, he pressed gently, you're a terrible liar. I sighed and handed him the envelope. He read it quietly, his expression darkening. When he looked up, his jaw was tight. They're really doing this? Yes, I whispered. They are. He clenched his fists. That's so wrong. After everything you've done for them. I smiled faintly. Some people mistake kindness for weakness, Ethan. They don't realize it's the opposite. He sat beside me, eyes full of worry. What are you going to do? I placed my hand over his. What I should have done a long time ago. The next morning, I went straight to my lawyer's office. He greeted me with that calm, rehearsed tone lawyers use when they know bad news is coming. Mrs. Holloway, I've seen the notice. It's not uncommon in estate disputes. Uncommon or not, I said, I won't let them bully me. He nodded approvingly. Good, because you're well within your rights. You were of sound mind when you signed the document, and we have witnesses. It'll hold. That should have comforted me, but instead I felt tired. So tired. Let them try, I murmured. They've been taking from me all their lives. This time they'll fail. That night, I found myself in George's study again. The scent of his cologne had faded a little, replaced by the faint must of paper and memory. I sat in his chair, the leather cold beneath my hands, and whispered, George, I hope you're proud of me. I closed my eyes and remembered his laugh, his way of smoothing things over whenever I got angry. Don't fight so hard, May, he used to say. Some battles win themselves with silence. But George never had to fight for respect from his children. That battle was mine alone. The next day Peter called. His voice was sharp, full of rehearsed calm. Mom, we don't have to make this ugly. Just withdraw the new will and we'll forget all of this happened. I took a breath. You mean you'll pretend to care again? He ignored the jab. We're just trying to protect what's fair. Fair, I repeated, my voice shaking. You keep using that word. Tell me, Peter, what's fair about burying your father alone? He hesitated. That's not the point. It's exactly the point, I said coldly. Fair would have been showing up when it mattered. He fell silent for a long moment. Then quietly he said, You're making a mistake. No, I replied. I'm correcting one. And then I hung up. After that call, I expected anger, guilt, maybe even fear. But instead, I felt lighter. For the first time in my life, I wasn't begging anyone to stay. I was teaching them how it felt to be left behind. That evening, I cooked dinner for two just out of habit. Then I realized there was no one else to eat with. No George, no family. So I packed one plate for myself and another for the neighbor's old dog, Scout, who always waited by my porch. He wagged his tail like I'd just given him gold. Funny how gratitude can come from the unlikeliest places. Days turned into weeks. The case dragged on. Letters, calls, formal notices, each one colder than the last. And yet, through all of it, Ethan stayed by my side. He came over every weekend, helping with the yard, fixing the loose steps, making me laugh when I thought I couldn't anymore. One afternoon, as we were raking leaves, he looked up at me and said, Grandma, I think they're scared. Scared of what? I asked. Of you, he said simply. Because you're not scared anymore. His words hit me like a revelation. He was right. I wasn't scared. Not of losing money. Not of losing them. Because you can't lose what was never really yours to begin with. But the peace didn't last. Because one evening, a car pulled into the driveway again. Not Peter's. Not Celia's. A man in a gray suit stepped out, holding another envelope. Mrs. Holloway, he said. Yes. He handed me the papers. You're being summoned to mediation. I took the envelope, nodding slowly. Thank you. When he left, I closed the door and leaned against it, the weight of it all pressing down on my chest. They were taking this all the way. I looked toward George's photo on the wall. His eyes, soft, patient, familiar, seemed to watch me. And I whispered, You wanted peace, George. But to get there, I might have to go to war. The fire crackled softly behind me. Outside, the wind howled through the trees. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid of the storm. I was ready to stand in it. The mediation hearing was set for the following Monday. I didn't sleep the night before. Every hour felt heavy, like time itself was holding its breath, waiting to see if I'd falter. But I didn't. I couldn't. By dawn, I was dressed and ready. Black skirt, cream blouse, George's old gold watch on my wrist. He'd given it to me on our 30th anniversary, saying, May, time is our most precious thing. Spend it wisely. And I had, just not on the right people. The law office was downtown, all glass walls and cold marble floors. When I walked in, Peter and Celia were already there, sitting side by side, whispering. They looked up when they saw me. Celia smiled faintly. Mom. Her tone was polite, rehearsed, and full of poison. Peter didn't even bother pretending. He just nodded stiffly. I sat down across from them, my lawyer beside me. The mediator, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes, began the session. Mrs. Holloway, she said gently, your children claim you were emotionally influenced when drafting your will. They're asking for an equal distribution of the estate. I folded my hands, and I claim they were emotionally absent when their father was buried. The room went silent. Celia was the first to speak. Mom, we're not the enemy here. We're your family. Family, I said softly. Family doesn't vanish when it's inconvenient. Peter's jaw tightened. You're making this sound worse than it is. Oh, I'm sorry, I said. Would you like me to make it sound prettier? The mediator cleared her throat gently. Let's focus on the matter at hand. I nodded, sitting back. Of course, the matter at hand is love. The lack of it, the pretending, the taking. That's what this is about. My lawyer gave me a cautious glance, but I didn't stop. Celia leaned forward, trying to sound rational. We just want fairness, Mom. You've been through so much. Grief can cloud judgment. I smiled, calm but sharp. Grief didn't cloud my judgment, Celia. It cleared it. Peter sighed, rubbing his temples. This is going nowhere. Mom, if you just trust us, we could manage the house, sell it, and divide things properly. Ethan doesn't even know how to handle money. My voice cut through his. And yet he knows how to handle people with kindness. Their faces twisted, wounded more by pride than pain. The mediator tried again. Mrs. Holloway, is there any compromise you're willing to make? I looked straight at my children and said, I already made a lifetime of compromises. I have nothing left to give. Celia frowned. You're being spiteful. I shook my head. No, dear. I'm being fair. For the first time. Peter stood up abruptly, pacing. Fine. If this is how you want it, don't expect us at Christmas or ever again. I felt the sting of his words, but I didn't show it. Instead, I said quietly, I'll light a candle for you both anyway. The mediator ended the session shortly after. There was no agreement, no reconciliation. As I left the room, I heard Celia whisper, she's lost her mind. Maybe I had, or maybe for the first time I'd found it. Outside, the autumn air was cool against my skin. The city buzzed with life, but I walked through it like a ghost, free, unseen, and untouchable. That evening, I came home to a voicemail. Ethan's voice, soft and steady. Grandma, I heard about the hearing. I just wanted to say I'm proud of you. Grandpa would be too. I replayed it twice. Each time it steadied something in me. The loneliness that once felt unbearable now felt like armor. Because sometimes, peace doesn't come from being surrounded. It comes from standing alone and still feeling whole. Over the next few weeks, I went back to my routines. Tea in the morning, letters by the window, walks to the cemetery every Sunday. I'd sit by George's grave, brushing the fallen leaves away, whispering little updates. They're still fighting, you know, I'd say. But I'm not afraid anymore. The first frost had begun to settle, painting the grass white. I could almost hear his voice in the wind. Good girl, May. Then one morning, there was a knock at the door. It wasn't Peter. It wasn't Celia. It was Ethan. He stood there, holding a folded piece of paper and a nervous smile. Grandma, he said softly, I need to show you something. I let him in. We sat by the fire as he handed me the paper. It was an essay, something he'd written for school. The title read, The Woman Who Taught Me What Strength Really Means. My throat tightened as I began to read. Every line was like a mirror of my heart. He'd written about love, sacrifice, and courage. About a woman who stood alone when everyone else turned away. By the time I reached the end, my eyes were wet. My grandmother showed me that doing the right thing isn't always easy. Sometimes it means losing people you love, but it also means finding yourself. I looked at him, speechless. He smiled shyly. You like it? I took his hand. I love it. That night, after he left, I sat by the window again. The moonlight spilled across the table, landing on the lawyer's envelope still sitting there. The one that started this war. I opened it one last time, then quietly tore it in half. I didn't need to read another threat, another accusation. I knew who I was now, and I didn't need their approval to feel whole. A few days later, I received a call from my lawyer. Mrs. Holloway, he said. Good news. The court dismissed your children's claim. The will stands. For a moment, I couldn't speak. Are you sure? Yes, ma'am. It's final. I thanked him, hung up the phone, and just sat there in silence. No celebration. No tears. Just quiet relief. It was over. I went to the cemetery that evening. The sunset bleeding gold across the sky. I knelt beside George's grave and whispered, We did it, love. They can't hurt us anymore. The wind rustled through the trees, soft and warm, as if he was there, smiling that quiet smile of his. For the first time in months, I felt peace. Real peace. But even then, something inside me stirred. Because when peace finally comes after a storm, it doesn't always mean the clouds are gone. Sometimes it just means you've learned how to walk through the rain. And somewhere deep in my bones, I knew Peter and Celia weren't done yet. Not by a long shot. The peace lasted less than 2 weeks. For the first time in years, I slept soundly. I made tea in the mornings without dread tightening my chest. Ethan's laughter filled the house every weekend. Even the garden bloomed brighter, as if it too could breathe again. But storms have a cruel habit of circling back, especially when you think the sky has finally cleared. Started with a phone call, late afternoon, an unfamiliar number. I almost didn't answer, but something told me to. Mrs. Holloway, a man's voice said. Yes, speaking. This is Detective Ryan Ellis with the county police. I'm calling regarding a complaint that's been filed. My stomach tightened. A complaint? Yes, ma'am. From your son and daughter. They're claiming you may not be mentally competent to manage your estate. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. I sat down slowly, gripping the edge of the table. The detective's voice continued, polite but detached. I'm required to follow up in person, just to verify your well-being. It's a standard procedure. I forced a breath. Of course, officer. You're welcome to visit. I have nothing to hide. Thank you, ma'am. I'll come by tomorrow morning. When I hung out, the silence in the room changed. It wasn't peace anymore. It was betrayal, cold and sharp, seeping into my bones. They hadn't just come from my money this time. They were coming from my mind. That night, I barely slept. I kept walking around the house, touching the things George and I built together. The framed photos, the bookshelf, the cracked teacup he refused to throw away. All those years of love. And now my own children were trying to erase me. At one point, I caught my reflection in the window. I looked older than I remembered, but not weak. No older, yes, but wiser, sharper. I whispered to myself, they think I'm losing my mind. Let's show them just how wrong they are. The next morning, the doorbell rang right on time. Detective Ellis stood on the porch, polite and professional, with a notepad in hand. Mrs. Holloway, he said warmly, thank you for letting me visit. Of course, I replied, smiling calmly. Would you like some tea? He looked slightly surprised. That would be lovely. I invited him in, guiding him to the kitchen where the sunlight poured through the lace curtains. The house smelled faintly of cinnamon and old books, comforting, lived in. As he sat down, he glanced around. Beautiful home you have here. Thank you, I said. My husband built half of it himself. We lived here 42 years. He smiled. That's impressive. So, this is mostly a formality. I just need to make sure you're managing your affairs safely. briefly. Of course, I said smoothly. Would you like to see my records? I led him to George's study, pulling out the neatly labeled folders, bills, taxes, receipts. Everything in order, everything dated, everything balanced to the cent. He flipped through a few pages, eyebrows raising. This is meticulous. I smiled. When you raise children who forget you exist, paperwork becomes your company. He chuckled softly, then looked at me curiously. You seem perfectly lucid to me, Mrs. Holloway. May I ask, why do you think they filed this claim? I paused, choosing my words carefully. Because I said no. And some people would rather call you crazy than face their own guilt. He nodded slowly, understanding dawning in his eyes. I see it all the time, he said quietly. Family can be the cruelest kind of stranger. After he left, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at the half-empty teacups. He believed me. Of course he had, because I wasn't the one losing control. Peter and Celia were. Still, the visit had shaken me more than I wanted to admit. It wasn't just about the insult. It was about the realization that my own children would rather destroy me than accept their own failure. That night I called Ethan. He picked up right away. Grandma, everything okay? Yes, love, I said softly. Your mother and uncle are testing my patience. He groaned. What did they do this time? I hesitated, not wanting to worry him. They called the police. Said I might not be well. There was silence on the other end. Then I heard his voice trembling with anger. They did what? It's all right, I said gently. I handled it. The officer saw right through it. He exhaled hard. They're unbelievable. I smiled faintly. They're scared. That's all. They're losing the one thing they can't control anymore, me. The next morning, I found an envelope slipped under my door. No name, no address, just one line in Peter's handwriting. This isn't over. I folded the note carefully, then burned it in the fireplace. The paper curled, blackened, and vanished into ash. No, Peter, I whispered. It's over when I say it is. In the days that followed, I started preparing for the inevitable. The next move, the next blow. They wouldn't stop until they were certain they couldn't win. So I decided to make that certainty absolute. I met with my lawyer again and added one final clause to my will. If anyone contested it again, they would be legally and permanently disinherited. Every penny, every share, every right, they would lose it all. My lawyer looked up at me. You're sure about this? I smiled. Completely. He hesitated, then nodded. You're one of the strongest clients I've ever met, Mrs. Holloway. I laughed softly. That's because I've already survived my own children. That night, I felt lighter again. The house, once haunted by their absence, felt alive with something else. Freedom. I poured myself a glass of wine, sat by the fire, and watched the flames dance. George used to say, "May fire burns, but it also cleanses." He was right. The past few months had burned me raw, but in that heat, I found clarity. Still, even as I sat there, a strange chill crept into my heart, because something told me this wasn't just about money anymore. It was about revenge. And when blood turns against blood, revenge never stays silent for long. The clock ticked softly. Outside, the wind howled, and deep down I knew my children were planning something far worse than a legal fight. They wanted to break me, but they'd forgotten. I was already broken once, and a woman who's already buried her husband alone has nothing left to lose. I woke up the next morning to a strange noise outside. Not the usual hum of traffic or the wind brushing through the trees. This was heavier. A dull thud, a man's voice, then laughter. When I pulled back the curtain, my heart sank. Peter. He was standing in my driveway with two men movers, a truck idle behind them, loaded with boxes and furniture that weren't mine. And taped across my front gate was a sign that made my blood run cold. Property under review. I rushed outside in my robe. Peter, what is this? He turned, calm as ever, hands in his pockets. Morning, Mom. Don't worry. It's just temporary. Temporary. I snapped. You had the nerve to come here unannounced again? He sighed. Look, Mom, it's complicated. The lawyer said the estate division might still be subject to review. We're just making sure nothing gets misplaced. I stared at him, stunned. Misplaced? You think I'd steal from my own home? He raised an eyebrow. You're angry. That's fine, but you're not thinking clearly. These are just precautions. My voice shook with fury. Precautions? You're invading my home. The two movers froze, unsure what to do. I turned on them. Get out, both of you. Peter's voice hardened. Mom, don't make this harder than it has to be. I stepped closer, my words low and cold. You've already made it impossible. Celia arrived 20 minutes later. Perfect timing, like always, right when she could play peacemaker. She stepped out of her car with her sunglasses perched on her head, her tone syrupy sweet. Mom, please. We're just trying to help. I laughed bitterly. You mean you're trying to take? Her smile faltered. You're overreacting. reacting. No, I said. I'm reacting exactly as a mother should when her children try to strip her of everything she owns. She sighed, putting a hand on my shoulder. You're tired, Mom. All this fighting, it's exhausting you. Why not just let us handle things? You can move somewhere smaller, maybe by the lake. Peaceful, quiet. My heart pounded. You want to move me out of my own home? Mom, this house is where I built my life. I snapped. It's where your father died, where you grew up, where I bled to keep a roof over your heads. Celia flinched. Peter looked away. For once, neither of them had a clever answer. I took a breath, trying to steady myself. Then I said quietly, leave, both of you, before I call the police. Peter scowled. You wouldn't. I met his eyes. Try me. Something in my tone must have told him I meant it, because he turned and gestured to the movers. Let's go. As the truck pulled away, I stood in the driveway, trembling. Celia lingered behind, her expression unreadable. Mom, she said finally, why are you doing this? We're still your children. I looked at her, really looked at her, and for the first time I saw it clearly. The entitlement, the coldness, the reflection of every sacrifice I'd made twisted into something ugly. No, I said softly. You stop being my children the day you stop being kind. She blinked stunned, then turned and left. That night, I sat by the window watching the empty driveway. The quiet should have been comforting, but it wasn't. Felt like a warning. When people like Peter and Celia lose control, they don't give up. They plot. I poured myself a small glass of whiskey, George's old favorite, and whispered, you'd laugh at this, wouldn't you, love? You always said they'd outgrow their greed. The whiskey burned my throat. Seems it grew with them instead. The next day, I got a call from my lawyer. Mrs. Holloway, he said carefully, your children filed a motion to freeze your accounts temporarily. My hand tightened around the phone. On what grounds? Alleged cognitive decline. They're claiming you may not be capable of managing finances. I laughed, a short, bitter sound. So they failed to take the house, and now they're coming for my bank account. He sighed. We'll fight it, of course, but it may take time. When I hung up, the laughter died in my throat. It wasn't just a legal fight anymore. It was war. That evening, Ethan came over. He found me sitting in the dark, the fire long gone cold. Grandma, he said softly, Mom and Uncle Peter came by earlier. They told me you're not well. I closed my eyes, pain piercing my chest. They went to you? He nodded. They said you were confused, that you were giving things away because you didn't understand what you were doing. I could hear the tremor in his voice. Hurt, anger, disbelief. Ethan, I whispered, do I sound confused to you? He shook his head fiercely. No, you sound braver than anyone I know. I smiled faintly. Then don't believe their lies. I don't, he said, but I don't understand why they hate you so much. My voice broke because I stopped being useful to them. He knelt beside me, his hand on mine. Then you still have me. I looked into his eyes, those clear, honest eyes that reminded me of George, and for a moment I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Hope. Promise me something, Ethan, I said softly. Anything. When I'm gone, don't let their bitterness touch you. Be better than them. He swallowed hard. I promise, Grandma. After he left, I sat by the fire again, the warmth flickering across the room. I thought about everything that had happened, the funeral, the will, the accusations, the betrayal, and suddenly it all clicked. Peter and Celia didn't just want what I had. They wanted to erase me completely, to rewrite the story so that they were victims and I was the villain. But they'd made one mistake. They underestimated the woman who taught them how to fight. The next morning, I wrote 2 letters, one to my lawyer and one to Ethan. In the first, I instructed that all future correspondence go directly through him. In the second, I wrote something much more personal. Ethan, if you're reading this, it means things have escalated. Don't worry for me. I faced storms worse than this. Remember what your grandfather used to say. Holloways don't bow, they rise. Whatever happens next, know that I'm proud of you. Always. I sealed both envelopes and placed them in the safe. The lock clicked shut, and a calmness settled over me. As I knew, the next move would be mine. But as I walked past the window that night, I froze. Across the street, a car sat idling, headlights off, and inside 2 silhouettes, watching. I stepped back slowly, my heart pounding. Peter, or Celia, or maybe both. They weren't done. Not yet. That night, I didn't sleep. Every creak of the floorboard sounded louder. Every shadow seemed to move. The hum of the refrigerator felt like a whisper in the dark. They were watching me. Could feel it. That car outside didn't leave until dawn. By the time I finally looked again, it was gone. But the tire marks on the wet pavement were still there. Proof that I wasn't imagining it. I made coffee, though my hands shook as I poured. Fear isn't new to me. I've lived through years of quiet fear. Fear of bills, of illness, of loneliness. But this was a different kind of fear. The kind that crawls under your skin because it wears your children's faces. I tried to distract myself, laundry, dishes, reading, but my mind kept circling back to the same question. How far were they willing to go? By afternoon, the phone rang. When I saw the name, my stomach twisted. Celia picked up slowly. What do you want? Her voice was unusually soft. Mom, please don't hang up. I just want to talk. I stayed silent. She hesitated. Peter's gotten out of hand. I didn't agree with what he did yesterday. Watching my house, I asked flatly. Silence. Then a shaky breath. He's just angry, Mom. He feels like you betrayed us. I almost laughed. Betrayed? I spent my life giving him everything he ever asked for, and now I'm the traitor. Her voice cracked. You don't understand how hard this is for us. My patience broke. You mean how hard it is for you to realize the money stopped flowing? She gasped softly, and I knew I'd hit the truth. Mom, she said after a pause, we can fix this. Peter's planning something stupid, and I just need you to listen to me. I frowned. What's he planning? I don't know the details, but he said you won't win. He said he'll make sure of it. Her voice trembled, and for a brief second, I heard my daughter again. Not the manipulative woman she'd become, but the frightened little girl who used to run to me after nightmares. Celia, I said quietly, you still have a choice. Don't follow him down this road. She didn't respond. Then finally a whisper. I don't know if I can stop him. That night, the wind howled outside and the lights flickered. I locked every door, every window, double-checking them one by one. Old habits die hard. I sat in George's armchair with his old revolver in my lap, unloaded, but heavy enough to remind me I wasn't powerless. He kept it locked in the basement since the 70s, just in case. Funny how just in case always arrives when you least expect it. The house felt alive with tension, breathing with me, waiting. Around midnight, I heard a noise, a soft scrape near the back door. My heart stopped. Then another sound, a faint metallic click. I stood slowly, every nerve on fire. I didn't turn on the light. Instead, I moved silently toward the kitchen, my hand clutching the cold steel. The back door handle jiggled once, then again. Who's there? I called out, my voice steady but sharp. Silence. I waited. Then suddenly footsteps, running. I rushed to the window and caught a glimpse of a dark figure darting toward the street. Too far to see clearly, but the shape, the build, it looked like Peter. I stayed frozen for a long time after he disappeared, my pulse hammering in my ears. Then I sat down slowly and whispered, you've gone too far, my son. The next morning, I called the police. I told them what I'd heard, what I'd seen. They sent an officer to take a report, but I could tell by the look in his eyes he didn't believe me. Ma'am, he said gently, are you sure it wasn't an animal or a neighbor? I glared at him. Do animals try to pick locks? He shifted awkwardly. We'll increase patrols in your area, just in case. When he left, I realized something important. If Peter and Celia wanted to paint me as unstable, they'd use this moment against me. So I needed to be smarter than them, calmer, colder. That evening, Ethan stopped by again. He noticed the police car pulling away. Grandma, he said, eyes wide. What happened? I smiled faintly. Nothing I can't handle. But he saw the tension in my hands, the exhaustion in my eyes. He sat beside me, voice low. You think it was them, don't you? I hesitated, then nodded. Yes, or at least him. He clenched his jaw. Then we call them out. We show everyone what they're doing. I smiled sadly. Oh, sweetheart, sometimes you can't fight evil in the open. You have to make it expose itself. After he left, I sat at the kitchen table and opened George's old notebook again, the one filled with his thoughts, his regrets. I flipped to the last page, where he'd once scribbled something I hadn't noticed before. If they ever forget who you are, remind them quietly. Let truth do the talking. I traced the words with my fingertips. George always believed that people destroy themselves when faced with the truth. Maybe it was time to test that theory. The next day I called Celia. Invite Peter over, I said. Why? She asked nervously. Because it's time we settled this face to face. She hesitated. Mom, he's angry. He might. Celia, I said firmly. Trust me. And for once she did. That evening I prepared everything. The will, the letters, the documents proving their lies. I laid them all neatly on the dining table, waiting for my children to arrive. The house felt like a stage set for the final act of a long tragic play, and I was ready for the curtain to rise. At 7:45, headlights appeared in the driveway. 2 doors slammed. Footsteps approached the porch. Then a knock. I took a breath, smoothed my hair, and opened the door. There they were. Peter, tense and scowling, and Celia, anxious but quiet. Come in, I said softly. They stepped inside, unaware that tonight would change everything. They stood in my foyer like strangers who knew the floor plan by heart. Peter with his jaw set, Celia with that careful smile. I kept my voice steady. Dining room. We walked past the old piano George tuned by ear. Its keys were silent. I didn't touch them. Silence had a better sound. On the table lay folders, neat and labeled. Receipts, witness statements, a flash drive and a small glass dish. Peter eyed them like traps. Celia glanced at me, wary. I nodded once. Sit. They sat. I remained standing. Power lives in posture. Late but not too late. I invited you because truth deserves an audience, I said. Calm, kind, the kind that stings. You filed to freeze my accounts, I continued. You called the police on my mind. You sent movers to my door. And you watched my house at night. I slid the first folder forward. Bank records, phone logs, copies of filings. Nothing dramatic, just precise. ice. Celia swallowed. Peter didn't blink. Pride can't blink. It only stares until it breaks. Then I tapped the glass dish. The flash drive is last. First this. I played a voicemail on speaker. Detective Ellis, courteous and clear. A routine wellness check. A closed report. No concerns. Competent, organized, steady. His words, not mine. Celia shifted. Mom, we were worried. I met her eyes. About me or about money? She looked away. The answer sat between us. Peter leaned forward. Cut to the chase. I lifted another page. A photo of a note. The one I had burned. This isn't over. In his handwriting. Proof of intention. Peter's mouth tightened. He didn't deny it. You took a picture? Yes. Fire and evidence, I said. Next, a still image from the new camera by the back door. A shadow at midnight. Shoulders, height, gait. Not a name, but a mirror offered. No police, I said. Not yet. Tonight is about choice. Yours, not mine. I raised my chin. My will stands. The clause stands. Contest it again, and you lose everything permanently. That includes the cottage you wanted, Celia. Her breath caught. Peter scoffed. You won't do it. You don't have the heart. I smiled cold and clean. I buried my husband alone, I said. I have every heart required, and a pen sharper than your threats. This is the last kindness I will offer. I slid 2 envelopes across the table. Names handwritten. One for him, one for her. A mother's last gift. Inside is not money, I said. It's a map back to yourselves. Therapy. Debt advisors. Places that fix things you pretend aren't broken. Peter laughed without humor. Celia's eyes glistened. Pride fought mercy in both. Mercy did not run. You can walk out, I said, or accept help and leave me in peace. Either way, I keep my home. Either way, Ethan keeps the legacy of care. Decide who you want to be. The clock clicked hard as a gavel. Peter stood. His chair scraped like a warning. Come on, Celia. He reached for the envelope, then left it. Celia didn't move. Her hands trembled. She looked at the flash drive. What's on it? Truth, I said. From the night at the door. Enough to prove intent. Enough to shame, not to jail. Unless I must. Tears rimmed her lashes. I miss Dad, she whispered. So did I. Grief flooded the room like light. I miss who we were before we got expensive, I said. I miss simple dinners. I miss your small hands. I miss yes meaning joy instead of debt. I miss us. Celia finally took her envelope, held it to her heart. I'm sorry, she said. Not absolution. A door unlocked. She stood. Peter waited in the hall, hard as stone. She brushed past him without speaking. They crossed the threshold. The house breathed. I locked the door gently. No triumph. No applause. Just the clean click of a boundary. The next morning, I met Ethan in the garden. Frost jeweled the roses. He wore George's old scarf. He looked like every good decision I had left. I told him everything. He listened. Kindness made space for air. When I finished, he nodded. You chose love, he said. Even when it sounded like no. We raked in easy silence. Birds stitched the sky. The sun climbed, unhurried. I felt steady in its warmth. Old yes, but unafraid. Later, at the cemetery, I traced George's name. I told him the house still stood. I told him our grandson stood taller. I told him love had taken the stand and won. The wind answered with leaves. On the way home, I bought lilies, the kind he teased me about. I set them on the piano. Then I played a note, just one. It lingered like a vow. Not to forget, not to hate, to remember cleanly, to live even after. That evening, the doorbell rang once. Not demand, not threat, just a single ring. I opened it. Celia stood there alone, no armor. Her eyes were puffy but clear. May I come in? She asked. Her voice was small. I stepped aside. In the kitchen, she set the envelope on the table. I read it, she said. I made 2 calls. Debt and therapy. I'm starting both. My throat tightened. Good, I whispered. She nodded. Mom, thank you for not giving up on me. A fragile thing fluttered. She glanced toward the hallway. Peter won't come. I know, I said. Pride has a long winter. We'll leave a light on. We didn't fix everything. We drank tea and let quiet work. Sometimes repair hums, not shouts. Sometimes mercy is maintenance. We chose maintenance. When she left, the house didn't feel larger. It felt right-sized. I washed 2 cups, watched dusk soften the walls. I breathed. I wrote one last letter before bed. To the woman I used to be. I thanked her for surviving everyone. I promised we were done apologizing for boundaries. Then I slept. In the morning, I woke to ordinary light. No cars idled across the street. No shadows tested the locks. Just a day like any other. Just peace learning how to stay. Love is not a ledger. It is attendance. It is showing up. It is a boundary held when storms arrive. Finally, it is peace earned without permission. And I will choose it again tomorrow.